the head of the Debt Management Office of Nigeria, Patience Oniha, has secured a second term of 5 years as President Muhammadu Buhari has extended her tenure on the basis of good performance as the head of the agency, says the Director General. Now, a statement issued by the presidency stated that the debt office has made significant achievements in the past 5 years under Patience Oniha. Joining us to discuss the latest development with me from the Market Street is Mr. Johnson Chukwu. Always a pleasure to have him. Licensed dealer, CEO, Cowry Asset Management. Good evening, sir. It's good to see you again. Can you tell us, I guess, your take on the reappointment of Patience Oniha as Director General of the Debt Management Office?
Thank you, Lotus, for having me. Well, it was most expected. There's a saying that the reward for hard work is more work. And I think she did well in her first 5 years of that on that job. And it's expected that the president should have or ought to have reappointed her, which is what has been done. If you look at what she achieved in DMO, Debt Management Office, in the past 5 years, it's clearly worthy of celebration and worthy of reappointment.
Fantastic. How critical is the Debt Management Office to the nation, to the financial markets? How would you assess that?
Well, a couple of, let's start from the nation. The DMO, Debt Management Office, is the agency of the government that manages the federal government debt. And to some extent also intervenes in ensuring that states maintain some level of debt sustainability. If you recall, we've seen a gradual shift from local currency debt, which is more expensive, to foreign currency debt. The target was to achieve about 40%, and I think they are close to achieving that. So in effect, the DMO has been helping the government to raise long-term funds. DMO, under Ms. Patience Oniha, actually introduced the first Sukuk bond in 2017. We've had 4 issues of Sukuk bond, which have been raised specifically for projects, and those projects are littered across the country. We have physical infrastructural projects that we have funded with Sukuk bond. She also introduced the first set of green bond in this country. We've raised 2 green bonds. Beyond that, DMO under her leadership has actually raised a series of Euro bonds, which have helped government stabilize its finances. Of course, we know the government is running huge deficit, and the government would have been unable to operate or function without raising funds from the capital market, which the DMO has been doing.
Fantastic.
Then,
yes,
further to the aspect that relates to the financial system, the DMO has been able to create new instruments into the capital market, new tradable instruments. I mentioned the Sukuk bond, you have the green bond, you have series of Euro bond, and those bonds have actually further deepened the Nigerian financial market and attracted a lot of not just domestic investors, foreign investors.
Fantastic. As far as the ratings for the federal government, debt ratings within the creditors' circle, how has the DMO impacted that region?
Well, one of the things that rating agencies look at is transparency. And, we used to have a very upper queue debt reporting system for the federal government vis-a-vis other state governments. Today, on a monthly basis or at least quarterly basis, Debt Management Office publish a Nigeria debt profile indicating local currency debt, foreign currency debt, distribution of those debts according to lenders, and the different formats of that, our current debt, our debt position. So that has created a lot of transparency, and that transparency has also helped in improving the standing of Nigeria as it relates to rating agencies, because you can clearly say this is how much Nigeria owes. And based on that debt, rating agencies can actually determine our debt sustainability, our credit standing, and our risk, and also carry out proper risk assessment.
Great. Now, I mean, you've listed a lot of things there, but for you as a market professional, I mean, with everything you've discussed so far, can you point to any of the milestones under Patience Oniha over the past 5 years as head of the DMO?
Well, I didn't mention some of them in passing. I did mention that she introduced the first set of Sukuk bond in the country, and we've raised about 4 series of Sukuk bonds. She introduced the first set of green bonds in the country, and we raised 2 sets of green bonds. She, under her leadership, introduced the promissory notes, which the federal government used to to liquefy and clear the debt obligations to contractors, to oil marketers, and as well as take on some state government debt, particularly those states had gotten to debt situation where they would have defaulted. So that way, the DMO has been able to help one moderate the impact of unsustainable debt at the state government levels, as well as create economic resources or provide economic resources to those who have been the creditors of the government, the contractors, the oil trading companies. Those companies may have gone bust if they did not have access to funding through those promissory notes. So she has, to a large extent, worked to stabilize the economy.
Great. For local investors, what would you say, has the DMO had any impact as far as deepening the markets, wealth creation? What would you say in that regard?
Yes, I did say earlier that in the first place, deepening the market, the introduction of Sukuk bond actually allowed some investors who are only interested in ethical instruments, who will not invest in other instruments, who will not invest in other fixed income instruments, to have window to invest in the market. And that actually brought in investors that were previously outside the market. Again, the likes of Federal Savings Bond also attracted retail investors who ordinarily did not have the financial wherewithal to invest large ticket funds in some of the federal government debt instruments. So, in effect, she has, through her activities, brought in retail investors into the market, or attracted more retail investors, as well as attracted retail ethical investors who ordinarily would not want to invest in instruments they considered unethical. So that way, she has been bringing more financial inclusion and expanding financial inclusion, as well as bringing and deepening the market.
Excellent stuff. Okay, so she's done great work, but I do have to ask you about Nigeria's debt levels. Are you concerned? I think first quarter we're at 40 trillion, I believe. And there is, of course, the high double digits debt service to revenue ratio. Going into 2023, a new administration, are you concerned about the debt levels for the nation? And I guess, how that's going to be managed going forward?
Well, not exactly the debt level as it relates to debt to GDP, but particularly debt service to government revenue. That's where the concerns are. We are getting to a point where debt service is almost consuming the entire federal government revenue. And certainly, a new government has to do something differently. Either we're able to grow the government revenue and shrink debt service to revenue ratio, or has to cut down on borrowing and find ways of paying down maturing debt obligations. So the concerns are also that some of the debt beyond the Sukuk bond I had mentioned earlier were specifically used for basic infrastructure, road infrastructure in particular. We cannot really pinpoint infrastructural investment that were made from a lot of other some of these borrowing. Of course, that's not the responsibility of DMO to do that. It's the responsibility of the federal government to have invested wisely the funds that have been raised, instead of just using it for budgetary purposes, particularly to just balance its budget.
Excellent. I'm glad you mentioned road infrastructure as far as what the Sukuk bonds have been used for. Do you support tolled roads to see these investments pay themselves back over time?
Absolutely. One of the things I've always emphasized that the government does not have the revenue profile to continue to build infrastructure from budgetary allocation. So what that means is that we have to find ways of commercializing some of those commercially viable, and I emphasize commercially viable infrastructure. It's not every infrastructure. Some infrastructure are basically social and they add to the well-being of the society, but there are some commercially viable, and those ones, the government must find ways to derive revenue from them, either by tolling them or concessioning the right of way, so that adverts along the right of way and other establishments could come up, like motels, parking lots, could be commercialized and generate revenue to, at the minimum, maintain those infrastructure and possibly to generate enough revenue to pay back those loans.
Mr. Johnson Chukwu, CEO, Cowry Asset Management, always a pleasure having you, sir. Thank you so much for joining us. Appreciate your time.